Chapter 3, Finance, Its Inevitable Movement. Way back in our evolution, some caveman swapped his neighbour a fish for a chook. On the way home, the chook laid an egg. Did he give it back? No fear. He ate it. A world-shattering event had taken place. He didn't have a name for it, but he had made a profit, and henceforth would seek that profit in all his dealings. The first banker had been born along with trade and profit. As trade in goods evolved among scattered tribes, it was only a small step until a system of exchange would emerge in the form of gold and precious stones, chosen for their rarity. I do not know when gold came to be established as the preferred basis of exchange. Its rarity and beauty made it ideal to fulfill the needs of trade, but that alone fails to explain its overreaching attraction to the human psyche. Who first realized this to establish it as the basic financial element throughout history? The ancients valued it, wars were fought over it, and civilizations hoarded it and offered it to their gods. The sacred metal that still fills bank vaults in this our modern age. Possession of gold has historically warped the vision of men. The greed for possession, the staff of power, hoarded in bank vaults or used as exchange and adornment. I wonder what it is really good for. Though indispensable as a basis for riches, gold possession demanded protection, and any physical exchange presented an element of risk. So to facilitate business transactions and expanding trade, coinage and credit facilities emerged, and such things came to be handled by separate financial structures, and so bankers and banking was born, growing to the great and those who feed them, and one of the most powerful elements in our society. Down the ages, power, land and riches were mostly hereditary and belonged to the upper end of society, regardless of how they were achieved. Ordinary people provided the muscle, the workers, the armies, up until the advent of the machine. The Industrial Revolution, while condemning millions to starvation, elevated a new breed to the higher echelons of society. These were the manufacturers, the businessmen, the industrialists, and the entrepreneurs. The focus shifted from landed gentry to the new business generators, whose wealth was built on cheap materials and cheap labour, along with expanding financial and credit facilities designed to promote increasing control and wealth. Such a rise in society promoted more education for the workers to increase their ambitions, but also increased people's demands for better pay conditions, health care, etc., and soon grew to the establishment of trade unions, where another power elite was born. Education of the workers and the poor led to their examination of the social ruling systems. Some of these systems were cast down to be replaced by dictators and republics, but always concentrating, not diffusing, the power syndrome. What was won by the sword had to be protected by the sword. Riches and power taken from one area only moved and concentrated in another, and regardless of who ruled, power and the economy remained. As the progress of our human evolution moved to surpass the ability of nature to support our growing population, our intelligence worked to subdue nature to our needs in agriculture, minerals, and medicine. Supporting that progress was and remains the development of a complementary financial system that was personal, national, and international. The necessity of an economy in the creation of profit to fuel ongoing progress. but our inherent power syndrome demands that progress and profit to become more and more concentrated. This concentration is unfriendly in the progress of a healthy society. It must be noted again that all men are not born equal. There are always those who are bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, destined to be more successful in their endeavours. This is how nature works, survival of the fittest, but because we are human, there is responsibility for those left behind. There is nothing wrong with being rich by honest endeavour. What is important is what we do with it and how we use those riches. What do these riches bring to the community? Will they provide more employment, more food, better housing, a living wage, more education and opportunity for the less able? Or will they be used to concentrate more power, wealth and influence to the possessors? Wealth brings power, and the question of the wealthy is how to use this wealth to benefit others or to abuse its power. To help counter the abuse of economic power, money must come to be seen and used as the grease that runs the wheels of industry, the mining, manufacturing, the agriculture, the employment, the research and development. All of these the necessities to support growing societies. Such an economic movement and philosophy would restructure the power of money as money and restructure the social and economic perspective on money and finance. As in all other aspects of our human endeavours, power moves to concentrate financial control in fewer and fewer hands. In Australia, where once there were dozens of banks, we now have 4 remaining. The rest have been swallowed by these 4, and it is the same picture all over the world. Once a safe repository for the people's money, which banks invested for reasonable profit for both bank and the depositor, banks have become protected masters of the workable economic system. What started off in reality as a safe deposit box for people's money has become the masters and dictators of our economics, thus moving them completely into the arena and game of power. And what people have forgotten to realise that it is a power game played with their money. In reality, it is a vast and clever con game where depositors are paid a pittance and profits are returned to shareholders and management. No longer does money grease the wheels of industry, but because it has been allowed to be traded, it has given birth to the power child of the markets, a vast worldwide financial phenomenon where the wealth of nations is traded for the benefit of a few, but with the power to destroy nations and governments. There is no law here but the law of the jungle, and has been amply demonstrated. The power and corruption of these markets is unlimited, and as the recent GFC demonstrated, something has to give. It was called the global financial collapse, but in reality it was not a collapse, but a concentration of resources in fewer hands. Born in the corruption and greed and hubris in the American banks and markets, its natural power progressor would have destroyed millions and threatened to establish order worldwide. So national governments had to socialise the debts of these financial institutions deemed too large to fail. This interference has not caused the problem to go away, only postponed it. It did provide the opportunity for governments to overhaul the financial systems, but they failed to do so, and the people, the banks, the market, the system that brought it about continues unimpeded. The result will be inevitable. If we want a financial system that will serve society, nations must stop allowing their currency to be traded on the markets. This would greatly reduce corruption and provide protection to national banks and economies. Establish a new banking system on a non-profit basis, thus returning money to its proper use as a servant of society, not its master. Redirect credit facilities to encourage small business and agriculture, and establish the health of our society as paramount over profits and shareholders. Profits are, of course, necessary for progress, but must be used for uplifting, not squeezing dry, and must have a bias towards employing people. These changes can happen, but only if science and society recognizes the what-if theory and moves to counteract the endemic human problem of power and its effects and corruption. The concentration of financial business power and cooperation has led to the exploitation of labour in poor nations. The manufacture of goods has been shifted to these centres where the workers are paid a pittance, their treatment ignored by their own corrupt officials. Their products are then exported back to the rich nations and sold at exorbitant prices. Such business practices does little to help workers in the poorer nations, and the export of jobs causes unemployment in the richer nations. Logic will demonstrate that this is a non-sustainable situation. In short, the financial system will concentrate resources and power to 3 or 4 dominant nations and a handful of large corporations within these nations. Those that should have fallen in the GFC will continue to fail, as that is the progress of power and survival of the fittest. The corrupt business and financial practice that spawned the GFC have not been corrected or punished. In some cases, the same people are still at the helm. This is an ongoing recipe for repeats until concentration is achieved. Correction of such a system is necessary because we live in a world of finite resources, and the weakness and corruption of governments help conceal this power concentration until a tipping point is reached. When that happens, economic power will be unleashed against the people, who will move from being profit builders to resource wasters, the rats that eat the corn. Mass unemployment will rise again even within rich nations, calling for more suppression by governments or revolutions by people. Regardless of either scenario, power will be the victor and become more concentrated within nations, because the effect of intelligence in a survival of the fittest environment, materialism and capitalism is the natural form of government. A cursory glance at our human history shows over time the rise and fall of kings, emperors, dictators and nations, all practicing varied types of government, ranging from oppressive to benign, all suffering the same fate with the inevitable concentration of power and riches. Now we no longer have to look at history. Just about all governments have surrendered to internal power corruption or the markets. American debt is unsustainable. The Eurozone is tottering beneath the markets and the power struggles of its leaders, Germany and France, enhanced by the nationalistic impulse of its members. China is creeping even closer to the goal of domination in finance, trade and cyberspace. America has been squeezed back to our own boundaries, events that will give rise to the domination of China or war. Whatever there comes, power and resources will concentrate to the victors. This will be the greatest and tightest concentration in our history. Whilst the power syndrome reigns supreme, nothing can prevent this concentration, because it matters not to power which nation wins. Historically, many forms of government have been tried, all demonstrating some effort to minimize the heavy hand of materialism and power on the people. However, with the rise of the computer age, the fate of people will become more irrelevant to the power structure. Where before we had armies with guns, now we're moving to computers with guns, and computers have no emotions.